All right, guys, we are live for another Thursday's Top Tips in Real Estate after a couple weeks off because of me. We are back and ready to get right back into it. This week, we have an amazing topic that is truly going to be a well source of knowledge for you guys and one of the biggest parts of real estate and what we do. So it is going to be navigating real estate contracts. Now, obviously, we cannot go through every single piece and portion of the contract because there is a million and one things to go over, and we would be here all day if we were reading the contract word for word for you. But we do want to make sure that you guys understand. Oh my gosh, my phone is we do want to make sure that you guys are understanding what the very and most important parts of the contract are. So we have the greatest and the best local realtors and lenders on with us today to share with you those great nuggets of knowledge that we always do every week here on Thursday's Top Tips in Real Estate live at 2 p.m. So we're glad that you guys are joining us today, and we're going to get right into it. I am going to share my screen with a as-is contract. There are many types of contracts out there, but the as-is contract is one that, is very well known in our industry and used quite frequently. And I think everyone on this call will agree with that. So I'm going to share my screen so that you guys can see it with us and walk along this process with us. So should be showing now. You guys can see it, right? All right. So guys, we have this as-is residential contract for sale and purchase. We're going to start off with Peter, and Peter is going to graze over the first page for us. Oh, and I do want to say really quick before we get started that there are 3 portions to this. We're going to graze over this and talk about the contract a little bit, have a little discussion portion with everybody. Then we're going to give your number 1 top tip of the week in section 2. And then there's some announcements portions at the end. So make sure that you guys stay tuned. This will always be streaming live on our Facebook page, but you can always watch the replay on our YouTube channel as well, Arrow Title Services. Just want to let you guys know in case you can't watch everything right now. So Peter, go ahead and take it away for us on page 1.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Peter Negron. I'm with Barron Real Estate. I just recently switched, yes, if anybody's wondering. And today we're going to go over the as-is contract. Now, while there are many contracts out there like construction contracts and as-is land contracts, this one is basically used for resales in Florida. Now, let's go ahead and kick it off with line number 1. As you can see, it's parties 1 and 2 are going to be both for the seller and buyer respectively. Now, we want to make sure that we have all the information for everybody that's going to be associated with this property on those 2 lines. If you scroll down to line 6, you'll see the property description there. Now, most people know the address and what county it's located in, but I would reach out and let your professional, real estate professional, go out there and fetch all of that information so that they can verify, because you do have to verify and make sure that everything on these contracts are correct, or else it'll make them void. If you scroll down to line 20 there, now these are going to be the personal items that are included in the purchase. Now, most times those personal items, if they're listed properly, will be listed right there on the listing agreement. So it'll show up on the property description when you look it up in the details. But oftentimes there are some negotiations that are made behind closed doors that'll include some things. So just make sure that you properly check all those lines to make sure that everything you negotiated are located in those lines. And we'll get deeper into these, both line 21 and 23 later on in this podcast today. Let's go ahead and get down to line 26. That's going to be the purchase price, and that's the total purchase price of the home. That's going to be including any add-ons that you have in line 20. So that's going to be the complete purchase price of the home itself. Now, if you look at line 27, the initial deposit is going to be the deposit you make on the home, just so that you can secure the property and start off that inspection process. Now, in some cases, you'll go ahead and pay the deposit right up front, but in many cases, you usually typically take about 3 days. You have about 3 days to put in that initial deposit, unless specified within that line 29 right there, you'll see. Now, if you go down to line 32, this is where all of Lucy's information goes. Yeah, you got to make sure you have your title company's address, phone number, email, fax information. That way everybody is privy to all of that escrow information. In some cases, you'll use specific escrow agents. You have to make sure to specify, especially when you're the seller, unless negotiated after the fact. Now let's go to the next line, which is 36. Now that's going to be where you put your actual deposit amount, and the next line down after that is going to be the financing. Now this is going to be where you put the actual amount that you're going to finance on the home after you subtract any deposits that you've already paid into the property. On line 39, you'll notice that there's a D or for other. This will be a line where you would specify if you had any other deposits other than the ones that we've already talked about, and you would just make sure that you would specify that right there in that line 39D in that other section. Now, E is where you put your balance to close. This is going to be the amount of money that you're actually bringing to the closing table. After everything is already annotated inside the contract, whatever left amount that you're going to have is going to be what's going to be located on that line right there. Now let's go to line 43. Time for acceptance of offer and counter offers effectively. This is a very, very important section. You want to make sure that you talk it over with whomever you're buying or selling with, so that you can make sure that you guys give yourself enough time frame to secure financing. Whether you need a little bit extra time to come up with any of those deposits, you need to make sure to specify this in this section right here. And if you go down to line 50, number 4, the closing date, that's going to be the expected closing date that you have. Of course, we all know things happen, so the closing date is not always set in stone, and that can be changed. And just remember, if you make any changes whatsoever on the contract, that those changes need to be initialed and dated by both parties or all parties that are associated with the contract. And at the very bottom there, you'll see that buyer and seller initials. Make sure that that's another thing that is checked off the box, because the last thing we want to do is wait till we get to the closing table and notice that the initials needed to be, annotated from back in whatever date that you initially started the contract. So take a good look at these contracts while you're going through them, and give your real estate professional a little bit of time to go over them themselves and make sure that everything is annotated properly, that you filled out everything that you need to be filled out. And we'll get into addendums and changes to the contract later on. But for now, that's page 1.
Awesome. Thank you, Peter. Great going over the first page. And then now we're going to head on to page 2. And we're actually going to go to the lending side of things. So the lending side here is going to be Tony, we're starting off with. And Tony, you're going to talk about the contingencies. So let me go ahead, and you're up next.
Awesome. So Tony Garcia here with Cross Country Mortgage. I'm going to go over the financing portion with you. Again, you're going to see a lot of items in here that quite frankly there's more that can be explained later on, but I'll go over some of the quick big points in doing so. So I am going to share my screen and bring this over so I can go down the list.
Oh, so you're sharing your screen now?
Well, because can I point out on yours or no?
Do you have it up on your screen? Do you want me to stop sharing this?
Can you see my screen now or no?
Well, here, go ahead, start sharing it now. Because I was sharing, so.
How about now?
There you go.
All right. Well, that way I was just figuring I could follow through
Yep.
with it that way. So,
Sure.
so the financing section here, the biggest thing is obviously if we're talking the lending side, this right here, the top line in number 8 is going to be if a buyer's paying cash. No offense to cash buyers. However, myself, Carol, and Eric on this call, that term to us is the worst thing you could ever say. So we like the part about the financing part. So we'll get into that here. So what you're going to see here is in the section B in line 8, you're going to see obtaining approval. So there's a few different loan options. Conventional, FHA, VA are the most common. Typically, that's where that's going to be checked a lot of times. Sometimes you will have other here if it's a portfolio type loan or hard money type loan as well, that can be put in there. So that's kind of going to be what type of loan you are going to be getting for financing. That way the sellers and the listing agent know, hey, what are we accepting? Because with these, and something we can go in deeper on another time, there's different things with those approvals that the sellers and listing agents need to be aware of with the property. So that's can be a big point on what a listing agent or seller is willing to accept on that specific property. Then it'll come down here. You have fixed, adjustable, and fixed or adjustable rate. This is just simply saying what type of product you're getting as far as your interest rate. Is it going to change, or are you going to be fixed the entire time? The next section down here is going to be interest rate. A lot of times this is left blank because you're not going to know your interest rate prior to going in and getting under contract on anything else. And then the last line here is your term. So how long is your financing going to be for? So again, as you can see here, a lot of these things even state if left blank, it's automatically in this situation, both going to be 30 days. Next line that you have on there is making loan application. So a lot of times individuals simply think, hey, made loan application, I talked to a lender, I talked to a bank. That is not true loan application. Loan application actually, once you're under contract, is signing your initial documents as far as what you call your loan estimate, everything else. That is a true loan application. You've made loan application. So once you get under contract, you have that time period to get going and get those steps out of the way with your lender. Keep going down the list. I lost myself going down the list. There's loan application. All this section here, a lot of it is simply just giving you the terms of showing that you're going to be doing good faith and doing due diligence to get the loan pushed forward. So if your lender's requesting for items to be needed, you are doing it diligently to get those items back and making sure you're giving good faith and moving forward and doing so. I think I skipped over a part. So the loan application, you're also going to have, in the end, there's sitting here somewhere and I can't see it, your loan commitment, loan approval period. So it's going to be typically, a lot of people end up doing it right around 20 days. And what loan commitment is going to be is simply you're getting your conditional approval. So the lender said, hey, everything looks good. We may need some updated bank statements and updated pay things like that. However, everything else is moving forward. As long as they get these items back, we're going to be on board, and then it'll go back for final approval. And that's typically, like I said, typically going between 15, 20 days or something for that loan commitment to come through. And outside of that, there's waiving the loan approval. And obviously, again, a lot of this is just due diligence on making sure you're doing it. And then if you're unable to get approved, you have to provide information back to the seller and listing agent that you were unable to obtain financing. That way you can see where you can go from there about your deposit. And the big factor is once you have that conditional loan approval, you have to legally let them know that you received it. So that's going to be from the buyer or the lender, as it authorizes in here that the lender is able to provide that information as well. So that is the big section there as far as the main points of the financing section.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony. Great information. And we are actually actually going to go to Eric, and it's not specifically in the contract, but a lot of people are aware that appraisals are a thing when it comes to a real estate contract, and a very big portion of the lending side. So I'm going to highlight Eric's screen so that he can share with you guys at this time what would happen if an appraisal doesn't go through, etc.
I'm big on that. Tony, great job. So kind of an appraisal in our world is what the property value is going to be worth. That's what any of your lenders is going to be able to use to lend against. What Tony talked about was a few different types of loans: VA, FHA, and conventional, and there's what's called non-QM loans. There's a different appraisal for each type of property. And I know all the realtors on here, they all always get scared. Is the house going to appraise? Is the house going to appraise? So at the end of the day, from a contract point of view, it's extremely important that it is filled out correctly so your lender can order the proper appraisal, because an FHA appraisal will not work on a conventional loan, and vice versa. With an appraisal, I don't want to say it gives the consumer an out, but at the end of the day, if the property doesn't appraise for what it's supposed to, then you can go back to the negotiating table. Other than that, I don't have a lot else to say about appraisals.
Very nice. Summed it up well. Thank you, Eric. All righty. So then now I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And next up we have Alannah, and she is going to share with us the portion of closing costs and such. Let me get back to sharing my screen. Here we are. And scrolling down to...
Thank you for that. I am mobile. So while you're getting to your place, I'm actually really familiar with Section 9, which is what I'm going to be going over. Basically, the next portion of the contract, beyond what Tony and Eric shared with us, is really the itemizing and breaking down who's responsible for paying for what. This section is going to go over what is the seller responsible for paying for, who's potentially offering a home warranty or not offering a home warranty. What are the amounts of that? This is the section where you're going to find a whole lot of those details. There's also a really good point that I am very appreciative I learned about this, and that is the section other, right there under section 9A. That little space other is where I've noticed that a lot of agents are not familiar to be looking there for seller concessions. So say I'm representing a buyer. The buyer is willing to offer even above asking price, but they need a little bit back towards their closing costs. This is the place where that is supposed to be written. A lot of agents will scroll right down to the bottom and pop it into the additional terms. That is also acceptable and fine, but this is the place where it's supposed to be, and this is the place where it needs to be looked for when you're representing a seller and looking to compare all of these different offers against each other to see which is the best fit for your client. So it's really important to sit down with your professional and have this explained to you. If you're in any way unclear, regardless of whether you're selling or you're purchasing, you need to know what you're responsible for paying for. A couple of the things that a buyer has the right to either get or to waive in this section is the survey, which the buyer has the absolute right to do, and most professionals on here I'm sure would agree that getting all the information before making a purchase this big is necessity. It's money well spent for your investment. But this is the place where you would potentially waive that right, or you would potentially put clauses on that. The other part of Section 9 that's really interesting is the title, evidence, and insurance. And I've specifically neglected to mention that because, Lucy, I think that you're the person who should talk about that.
Yes, thank you, Alannah.
You got it.
So I just want to say in this section, the biggest point to make is that at the bottom of page 3 here, this is where you're going to designate who is paying for title. So a lot of people have the misconception, you know, in some areas, people will say, oh, well, buyer always pays for title or seller always pays for title. And that's not necessarily the case. That is a negotiable factor when it comes to title insurance. So this is that section where it's saying seller shall designate the closing agent and pay for the owner's policy. Now, when it says who's paying for title, it is talking about who is paying for the owner's policy that comes with purchasing this property. Now, the owner's policy does cover the buyer moving into the home. It's going to be the policy for the buyer when they're purchasing that home, but this is a negotiable factor that's about a couple $1,000s. Now, why that becomes a negotiating power is because that couple $1,000s could be, oh, maybe you're going to offer just the sales price and then offer to pay for closing costs as a little bonus, or not the closing costs, but the title insurance as a bonus to say, hey, this is beefing up my contract a little bit and I really want this house, or whatever it might be. It's just a couple $1,000s that can be worked with in the contract. And there's many ways for negotiating, which is all on the realtor side of things. But that is just one of the ways in which you can do it. So this is from the title perspective, the whole contract is like a Bible for us. And that is what really tells us how everything is going to go in the process. So we just have to make sure that we know exactly who is paying for what and being clear on those standards. So the buyer, if buyer is paying for those closing costs, then that is going to be checked off right here. And whoever's paying for the title insurance on the property is going to be able to designate the closing agent, which would be us, hopefully. But if not, but
if not,
so those are the people
that
that have the power to be able
right.
So that is just one section of go ahead, Alannah.
Oh, and I was just gonna say that's absolutely perfect, and that's a huge chunk of this section 9. The very last little part that I just wanted to make sure didn't get missed was the very bottom of this section 9 is actually about special assessments. So that is another important thing to factor in. Is if the property is in the process of being connected to city water and there's an assessment on it, breaking that down, knowing up front that that's going to be added to your utility bill, that's where you're going to see that, oh, well, I'm taking on an assessment, or perhaps the seller is paying the assessment in full before closing. Whatever the decision is made at the negotiating table, those are the terms, and that's where that's laid out right there at the bottom of section 9.
Perfect. And I've circled it for people to see.
Oh, thank you.
On the screen.
Alannah with eXp Realty, my little bit. Did you would you like me to roll into disclosures?
Yes, please. Thank you, Alannah.
Perfect. You got it. So the next page is lots of fun. This is where your real estate professional in particular gets to really shine. They know the ages of the properties and the requirements that go with different disclosures. So for example, if your property is over a certain age, like pre-1978, for example, there is a requirement to include a lead-based paint disclosure, which doesn't necessarily mean that you're suggesting that there's lead paint, but you're letting the potential buyer know that there's the possibility of that due to the age of the home. And that's a requirement that's going to go through so many channels confirming that that's been done due to the age of the property. This page is going over several different possibilities. So it's letting everybody know that in the event any of the following applies to your property, that you will be including a specific addendum addressing that. And going over any information pertaining to it that you have as the seller up front. It goes into several pieces of this. I'm like looking really hard. The homeowners association disclosure, absolutely essential. If you're in a homeowners association, you're planning on buying or selling, expect to be asked to sign this. Just letting you know the terms of it. And there's several others, and all of them are just to make sure that both parties are aware from start to finish what the circumstances of this purchase are. And it's your professional's responsibility to make sure that you understand everything that you're signing. and why it might pertain to that property. The next portion down there, are you still scrolling, Luz?
Yeah, and the next portion goes into inspections, which would be Fabiola.
Wonderful. That's a perfect segue for Miss Fabiola.
Yes, thank you, Alannah. Great information.
Hi, everyone. Like she said, my name is Fabiola Simon. I'm with Keller Williams, also with Two Men in a Truck. So we're going to talk about inspections, and I don't want that word to scare you, but think of inspections as like your best friend that tells you what you don't want to hear, but you need to hear it type thing. But this is a section in the contract where it basically just says if something goes wrong, you are capable of negotiating or possibly canceling if you want to, based on the certain findings that your inspector finds. So there's really not much beef to it, except for that it's really a good place to have, I don't know, an inspector go over it with you or anything like that. But yeah, that's my little tidbit, just winging it.
And that they have a certain amount of days after their effective date too, right, Fabiola?
Yes, and there's a space that says it in there. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm circling it for everyone watching.
Yeah, so there's a space that has, and it says if you leave it blank as well, it's 15 days or something like that. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, if you leave it blank, then there's 15 days after the effective date, which we talked about a little bit earlier with Peter, but that effective date, Fabiola, is the date of the contract in which it's agreed upon, right?
Yes, and that's like when the clock starts ticking. So everyone is trying to move towards closing, but you just want to kind of get it done, get it together, and keep everything moving. Yeah,
awesome. That's a very big portion of it all. Thank you, Fabiola. That was great.
You're welcome.
All righty. Now, this next portion, there's kind of a lot going on here. Again, these contracts, and let me just say really quick with the contract is that it has a lot of different aspects highlighted into it, which aren't all going to necessarily affect you and your specific like what you're doing. So the contract is a generalized thing and you pick out pieces, whatever is going to apply to you, right? So in this section, the next few pages, it talks about the agent, the escrow agent and broker, and talking about just what we do as a whole. Like earlier, I said that as a title company, really the contract is our Bible. We're making sure that we are complying with everything that's in the contract. There are lots of different things that come across in these next few pages. Again, if I were explaining every single thing here all day, it would take a long time, but pretty much what these sections are saying is that the title, that we are going to make sure that there aren't, any, that we have title evidence that you guys actually own the property and that everything is being transferred over properly, that we're going to do a title examination, that we are going to do a title search, making sure, looking back 30, if not more years, and making sure that the title is free and clear. Now, it brings up some sections in here that if there are issues that come up, like liens on the property, or making sure that there is ingress and egress to the property. So ingress and egress would be making sure that you're actually able to get to and from the property, whether that be an easement or a road. Just making sure that all of the things are falling in line to make your property, making sure that your property is marketable title, and which essentially means that it's free and clear. So there's a million and one things that we do behind the scenes that a lot of people don't realize, one of which being, ordering that survey, making sure that there aren't any easements invading onto your property that you aren't aware of or that might have been added on. A lot of people aren't, land's been around for a very long time, for forever, right? And every time that it gets transferred over, there are more issues that could come up because of it protects you from anything that's happened in the past. And when it's breaking, when you're making those changes, and as people, you know, purchase land, build houses, make additions, like there's so many different things that could necessarily go wrong. Like there's sometimes people build fences and they build them on the wrong part of the property line, and they had an incorrect survey or whatever it might be. So there's so many different aspects to it that we just want to make sure that we're going over and reviewing and making sure that you truly have marketable title when it comes to your property that you're trying to purchase or the one that you're selling. So a lot of times we're just the middleman when it comes to the process. We're not, you know, for the seller or for the buyer. We are making sure that both are in agreement and that everything is good and good moving forward, that it's not just, no one's getting screwed over in the process is essentially what we're trying to do. And then if there are any liens against the property, we actually work with the seller and making sure that those liens are taken care of, moving forward with that. And then, you know, force majeure is just if there's any crazy natural acts of God, that's a whole nother aspect of the contract. But again, all of these things aren't necessarily, like, there may not be liens on your property. There might already be a survey on the property that you can use and you don't have to purchase another one. So there's so many things in this contract that aren't necessarily going to affect you in your specific contract, but could. And if they are, then they are covered in this contract. So yeah, it pretty much just, you know, closing location and documents, closing procedure, that we send out a title commitment once we do get the contract and everything. Again, a lot of information, and you're a professional. When you do hire a professional, which hopefully you will, they will explain everything with you and go over every aspect of the contract and make sure that you guys understand it fully, because it is something that you don't want to just breeze by. We're giving you a very basic rundown of it because we want to make sure that you guys at least know the most important parts of it. But yeah, so that's pretty much those few pages, is just telling you what we as a title company, like what we are looking for. And if there is anything that we need to address, then we will address it. So going on to the next portion, we are going to have Carol come on. And she's going to tell you from the lending perspective about the addendums that could be on this last page here.
Hey everybody, Carol Dols here with Gateway Mortgage. I'm going to touch base and talk about the most frequently used addendums that are necessary when you're buying a home. And I just want to point out from a lender's perspective, a lot of times when the realtors send us these contracts, they forget to send us the addendums. Or you may have an inexperienced realtor that didn't even check the box for the addendums. And we will make sure that all addendums are taken care of, because in all of these cases, the ones that I'm going to touch on, they affect any borrower that is purchasing a home using a loan. So the first one I'm going to touch base is the Condominium Rider. I know Alannah touched base on the disclosures. Along with the disclosures, you're going to use that addendum, because in that addendum for the condominium, it's going to say who the association is, what the dues are. So this is extremely important. Same thing with the Homeowners Association. You need to know if you're buying a home, if it's in an association, and that's what the addendum is going to tell you. It's going to tell you what the dues are. And the underwriters in a mortgage are looking for those addendums. We're also going to touch base on the FHA and VA addendum. This one is extremely important if the customer is using a financing for an FHA or VA. That addendum must be complete in its entirety, and those addendums must be signed by all parties, not just the buyer and the seller. That means listing agent and selling agent. Sometimes we don't get that signed either, but we will make sure it gets signed prior to closing. And FHA and VA addendums do indicate the amount that the house must appraise for, or either all bets are off or they renegotiate. I know Eric talked briefly about appraisals, but those are reiterated in the FHA and VA financing addendums. I also want to talk about the defective drywall. That one comes up depending on the age of the home. Some homes over in tradition, that would apply. I can't remember the date off the top of my head. And then that lead paint disclosure, if the house is dated older than 1978 or prior, that addendum must be in there to show that you've given them the disclosures. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about on addendums. Those are the most frequently used addendums that I can see in this little list here. A lot of them I've probably never seen. But for the most part in our area, those are what you're going to see. You might see a short sale every once in a while, but those have kind of slowed down tremendously. That's it for addendums.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. Awesome. And then we're going to go to Codi, and he's going to explain the ending portion of this contract, the additional terms, the counter offers, and the signatures at the end. So go on, Codi.
Hello, hello. This is Codi with Bourgeois Real Estate Group. It's your favorite. So yeah, just chose the addendas because I'm actually currently working a deal that just made me the king of addendas. So it's, you know, basically anything that's negotiated after you've signed the contract. It includes, you know, your what type of lending you have, HOA, like they said, like Carol said. You know, the lead paint, any disclosures that you're required to include. It says right on the contract here, line 529 or 524, you know, they shall control all printed provisions of the contract that are in conflict with them. So it's basically an attachment to the contract that modifies the terms and conditions of the original contract, used to update the terms of the contract. It's always going to have the original the original contract date, regardless of, you know, when after the fact it is negotiated.
Your face favorite.
You want to always title it so that it shows in a way that is an addendum to the original contract. And that they are connected. So there is also the addendum, and then there's also a contract amendment, and there's a difference between the two. So the amendments change the actual terms of the contract, whereas the addendum, it keeps all the original contract terms in place, but adds additional ones. So if you have to negotiate, let's say, an extension or a different deposit amount, you know, that's what the addendum will be used for. If your buyer's agent sends an addendum or negotiates something with the sellers and the listing agent, and the sellers don't sign the addendum, then the original terms of the contract are going to apply. So you want to be sure you have a professional who isn't scared to negotiate. So now there is line 589 here, the counteroffer. So you want to make sure that your buyer's agent is, first of all, submitting a reasonable purchase price. The seller can either counter that offer or they can reject it. If they counter the offer and you want to continue negotiating, you can counter that offer. If the seller rejects the offer, then you can submit a new offer. But you know, they say a counter offer functions as both a rejection and an offer, as well as a new offer that materially changes the terms of any original offer. It gets kind of technical, but and then, you know, if you let the expiration date and time pass of the counter, then the counter offer is considered rejected. So you always want to make sure that you're keeping up with timelines and deadlines on the contracts. And that is my thought.
Yeah. And do you want to briefly graze over this last page where it's just everybody's signatures and finishing off the contract?
That's basically everyone involved. They have to sign and date. And that just confirms that everyone is in agreement of all the terms on that contract and any addendums and provisions included. Once you have signatures, your clock starts ticking. Get action done and get your lending taken care of, and everything else that needs to be done.
That's true. Yep. Once you have both buyer and seller who sign this, then you have a fully executed contract.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you, Cody. That
Everybody
was
is in
great.
agreement.
We call that a goal.
Awesome. Yeah. So there is a lot of information that we just went over. But there's truly so much that goes into a contract. And I think that everybody's points and aspects that they pointed on, I think were great. I hope that you guys, if you guys are watching, that you guys are going to look back and see exactly what we talked about. But I do want to give an opportunity to open up to the floor. We always have kind of a little discussion after each person talks. If there's anything that you feel like we could have highlighted on or want to just touch on even more, let me know.
I'd like to touch on one thing,
Yeah.
especially for anything that's associated with an HOA. Make sure that you really dig into the HOA assessments before you close, because if you don't, then it's upon the buyer to make sure to take care of all those assessments after the fact. So really look into what the association plans on doing later on down the road, or even that year that you purchase the property, or if there's already an existing assessment on the property because of something that the HOA has upgraded inside that building or community.
Very good.
Can I just add to that too? Because I just had that situation. You also want to make sure that you're paying attention to their capital contribution, because from what I understood, that came at closing, but some of these HOAs are now requiring that money up front, and those amounts can also change at any time. They reserve that right, apparently. So you want to be sure that you're keeping up with all of their requirements.
HOA is fun.
Yeah.
Cody, that one sounded personal, man.
Oh, it is. That's what I'm saying. I'm on addendum number 8.
Good luck.
Pros and cons. HOA.
You got this, man.
Oh, there you go. Pros and cons to HOA. That might be a new topic, guys.
Right.
Might have to tune in next week. Is there anyone else who has something? I think, Eric, you had something you wanted to mention, right? Or no?
No, I think we just went through what can be taught in 3 days in the matter of 45 minutes. So great job, everybody. Back to, I had talked about appraisals real quick. It's very important. That is the time as a lender we see if an appraisal comes in lower than what the asking price is, or the selling price. That's when we see the addendums. So it's very important for those to be done correctly. And if you're working with one of these realtors on the call, I'm confident it will be. But that's from the lending side, that's the biggest addendum that we see.
Absolutely.
And make sure they're all signed.
Yes, correct.
Shocking how that you just randomly forget that part, you know?
Agreeing to the.
Oh my goodness.
Oh.
The things you lenders see, I would actually love to hear, where are the couple of spots that, that you'd recommend agents like pay extra super attention to, because we're seeing a lot of this right now. Got any of those you'd like to throw
I'm sure
at
that's
us?
a whole nother topic, but yeah.
In this climate, man, like you have to really have somebody who's willing to negotiate, because, with the lenders being swamped the way that they are, the timeline's taking a little longer. You might have to negotiate some extensions and some additions, and like I had to negotiate after the fact a cosigner, so that required a couple addendums. So you just got to be ready to get it in.
In the end, it's all communication. Just getting a weekly update at either the beginning of the week, end of the week, especially once you get within that week of closing. But I mean, are extensions happening right now? Yes. We're lying if it ain't happening. If somebody's saying they're not, then they don't have much business. So But it's happening, and it's not just the lending side. It's, you know, title, everything else. So I'm sure you know that as well, Lucy. So it's, unfortunately, it's a crazy time, but you know, as long as you're in communication and have that stuff done, that's what matters most. So just make sure you have somebody you can trust getting in touch and keeping those updates going, because as the file moves, you need to know.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. And just that communication is key, and those your customer and clients knowing those dates, knowing all of the deadlines. And because we have so many people who call here and they're like, oh, what's this, you know, what's this date and when are we supposed to get this in by? But it's like, you know, the agent should be having that conversation with their clients. And I know that it's none of you guys on here because you guys are amazing.
Yeah.
But that's why it's so important that you guys, we've had a past live where we talked about interviewing your professionals and making sure that you really have the right person working for you on your team. So that's what it's all about. And we've got some great people on these calls every week where they dedicate their time to helping you guys understand exactly what's going on in real estate, because it's all about educating. We're in this every single day. Not one of us knows every single aspect of everything, but we're willing. I'll tell you right now, every single one of us on here is willing to figure it out for you. So, and that's the type of team that you want behind you, is someone who they're going to work for you and they're going to make sure that it's done right at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, every deal is different. Everybody has their own set of challenges, and you just have to be ready to take them on, you know,
Absolutely.
No matter what it is.
With that comunicado.
Yeah, the last thing I want to bring up is, even on some of the smallest things that you don't think of, I ran into this today is the only reason I'm saying, well, actually, I ran into it 3 weeks ago prepping for this to happen. I had one that needed flood insurance and told the client 3 weeks ago, hey, we're in a flood zone. I know we're trying to close this quick, but we're going to need that back. So start working on that, get things going. Again, it's everybody, you know, it's always time frames, but there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that it's not always there. It took, the elevation cert took a couple weeks. The insurance company, once we went to get the bound coverage. So we were supposed to be closing on Monday, and I just got the flood insurance, as crazy as it sounds, yesterday at 2 p.m. Well, right now, I'll be 100% honest, our underwriting turn times are right around 72 hours. I sent it back. Well, I didn't send it. My processor sent it back for final approval yesterday at 2 p.m. I had let the client know about a week ago now that, hey, we may have to push this closing a day or two because we have to have flood insurance. And I was told by them, why do we need flood insurance? It's never flooded. And that's another story that I said, you can call FEMA. I can't control that. It is what it is. But when it comes to that as well, that's all time sensitive stuff. And unfortunately, when your loan comes back and you send your conditions back into a lender for final approval, as much as I would love it to happen, your file doesn't go straight from there to an underwriter's hand saying, hey, we can clear it. There's timestamps. And right now, with the amount of loans coming in, you have a waiting period. It has to go in line. Luckily, as we were on this call, I actually got to clear to close. So that's a good thing, but in the end, so we're going to close, but there's other things. So it's all the moving pieces and parts. And, you know, a lot of times it's, why didn't we know about this sooner? Why couldn't you find this out up front? Things take time. It doesn't work that way. As much as we wish it's a perfect world, it's not. So you just have to be ready. You have to be communicating, and you also have to be ready to pivot, because unfortunately, everything is not cut and dry. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that none of us have control over, and you just have to be prepared and be working together, communicating, and having everything set the right expectations.
Absolutely, setting those expectations. Love it.
I love those buzzwords, Tony. Bring it. Yes.
Expectations, communication. make a wall about it. All right, guys. Well, I do want you guys to have your opportunity to say your number one top tip of the week, because this is Thursday's Top Tips in Real Estate, where we go live every Thursday at 2 p.m. If you guys are just tuning in now, you guys missed an amazing conversation, so you guys gotta watch the replay, which you can either do here on Facebook or on our YouTube channel, Arrow Title Services, after we are done with the live. But I'm going to go around and have everybody go ahead and give their number one top tip of the week in real estate. Peter, take us away. Oh, you're muted. There you go.
So My biggest tip right now, especially in this market, is be prepared. You have to be prepared. Honestly, the preparation that you take in the beginning will save you money. It's going to save you money over time. Just think about it this way: if you're trying to purchase that home that's at 235, but you weren't prepared to purchase that home at 235, that next home that you fall in love with may be 245 or 255. So make sure that you're prepared so that you can take action as soon as you're able to, along with your real estate your professional. So keep in conversation. Make sure you're keeping in conversation with your loan officers. Make sure you're keeping in conversation with your title service, because quite honestly, the last thing you want to do is wait till you get to the closing table to find something that's going to keep you from closing. So my tip right now is be prepared, because this market is super, super fast.
Very good one. Thank you, Peter. Next up, Eric, tell us your top tip.
All right, so we're gonna piggyback everything that we talked about. My top tip of the week, this is going out to realtors. So we just kind of went through in 45 minutes or whatever how difficult it is, how much stuff goes into this contract. My top tip is to use this knowledge to go after FSBOs, because people think it's very easy to do a for sale by owner. So for the realtors out there, use this, what we talked about, to show your professionalism and get those listings. That's my tip of the week.
And for if there are people who are talking about for sale or thinking about for sale by owners and watching this, they should think about, look at how much we just went over in this whole contract. And who if you just talk to a random person on the street and you say, hey, can you explain a real estate contract to me? No. Well, we can. If you're picking a realtor off the side of the road, you probably actually have a pretty good chance of running into a realtor.
Hey,
I mean,
just because it's true.
But if it's someone who's not a realtor in the real estate industry, you know, there's so much that goes into it. Fabiola, do you want to give us your top tip of the week?
Yes, kind of going off of what Peter said. If you want it, go get it. So there, I was taking a buyer around, and she kind of sat on a property, and of course, it got taken up like that. So if you want it, go get it. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Just put in an offer, do what you got to do, and go get whatever you're going after.
Love it. What about you, Tony?
So I'll go a little on that as well, but more as far as timing. So when it comes to interest rates, we know they're extremely low right now, and they're not going to stay this way forever. Just being honest, will there be big jumps? We're not going to go there. But if you are on the fence of, hey, do I purchase now? Maybe I'm going to wait. Maybe let's wait till this market kind of adjusts and comes down, because something bad's going to happen. All signs are pointing these prices ain't coming down. So if you're waiting for that to happen, you know, get out your wand and wave it and hope for whatever you can. But unfortunately, it's likely not going to happen. Prices are going to stay where they're at, or they're going to keep climbing. Just projections are there for that. With that being said, we not getting into this talk, but we have an election coming up. Typically when that happens, we're recovering from this COVID thing. We're recovering as an economy from everything that's going on. Once that happens, inflation sets in. Inflation, only thing that happens with mortgage rates when it comes to inflation, rates are going to slowly start creeping up. So not saying, hey, you're still not going to get a good rate. But if you're sitting there on the fence saying, man, I don't know if I want to buy now or buy next month, get locked in before you even have to worry about that, because you're not going to see this great pricing in a month or two that's any different from where we're at today. You may see it, though, however, inflating and starting to trend in the opposite direction. Still going to be phenomenal rates, but just don't sit on the fence and wait for a miracle, because it's not going to happen. Rates are great. Prices are going to stay where they're at or continue going up. So just be ready and move forward.
It's a great tip, Tony. A lot of people thought with coronavirus that everything was going to crash and that, you know, they could get houses for $2, but that didn't happen now, did it?
No.
Go ahead, Codi, you're up next.
My top tip would be to be consistent in being timely. What I mean by that is it's kind of a touch on what everybody just said. This market is moving so fast. Houses are moving quickly, rentals and purchases. It's to the point, I always say this, every week I say this, you know, it's to the point where you can't even go physically look at a home anymore. You have to make a decision based on the pictures you see because they move that fast. So, and then with everything that's going on and, you know, with the lenders, they're backed up partly because of refinances, because of these great rates. You know, you have to be consistent in being timely because you have deadlines to meet, things take time, things come up, things change. You know, if you have to speak to your realtor and your lender every day, then speak to them every day. Impose if you have to, you know, but just make sure that there's all that communication going on so everybody's on the same page so things can move along the way that they need to move along, and you can get things done. And, you know, again, if you're thinking about purchasing, now is the time. You know, it just is. So, you know, be consistent and being timely.
Love that. Thank you, Codi. What about you, Carol?
My top tip today, I'm going to circle back to our topic today on page 1 of the contract. If you have non-realty items out to the realtors, please talk to your lender first. If your customer is buying a home, especially if they're putting only 5% down or 3% down, if you've got a household full of furniture in there, it's going to get deducted from the purchase price dollar for dollar. So please talk to your lender. And then on the addendum pages, please make sure if your home requires addendums, FHA financing, condo, HOA, make sure you get those filled out into your lender upfront. It just takes time when we have to ask for these things after the fact. Speaking of time, you know, if we get everything up front, it's going to move quicker.
Absolutely. Love that, Carol. Next up is Alannah.
Carol, I'm so glad you said that. You're absolutely right. I want to, circle back, very, very close to the being prepared. Before you can be prepared, you need to be decisive. So if you are unsure, then you either aren't doing anything or you're heading to talk to somebody. Those are the only two places that you can go. And in addition to being decisive, I would say be prepared to be hanging on to your patience for dear life. This is not the kind of market for the faint of heart. This is not the one where your first offer is necessarily going to be accepted. That does not mean that your professionals on your team are slacking. It means that the market really is in that place where you need to trust the advice that they're giving. You need to ask lots of questions, and you just bring your patience to work with your professionals because they are just as invested in you getting to the finish line as you are.
I love that, Alannah. And you took part of my point too. My top tip, it's okay, was going to be make sure that you guys are patient during these times and that you really just understand that everybody is working their hardest. If you have picked an amazing team to work with, which again, anyone on this call, we are all working to make sure that you guys are going to have the smoothest transaction possible. And you just have to make sure that you guys have patience, understand that, again, ask questions. If you have questions, if you do not understand anything, first of all, we cannot read your mind. If you have a question, we will try to explain everything that we can. But if there's something that is specific that is pointing out to you and you don't understand and you don't ask us or your local professional, whatever that might be, whatever topic it might be on title, mortgage, or the real estate side, just ask the question and we will be happy to help you. Again, like someone said, I think it was Codi, if you got to talk to us every single day, that's okay. We're here for you. I will say that I've talked to a lot of people and we've talked about this on other calls. You're not going to get the level of service that you would from an online provider. If you're trying to use an online realtor, an online mortgage company, or whatever it might be, you're not going to get the same level of service. And it's unfortunate. It's very easy to go online and find, some numbers that might work for you or whatever it might be, but use local, use the people who are here every day trying to educate you and that are really going to have your best interest in mind. So that's my tidbit of the week. I know that we hash that out like every week, but it's important.
Let convenience result in disaster.
Yes, yes, exactly. And you're just being educated. And that's what we do these whole videos for. So we do go live again every Thursday at 2 p.m. with a new topic in real estate. So we want to make sure that you guys are educated on what you guys are signing at the end of the day. So does anybody have any last minute announcements that they want to announce before we end this week's video? No? Okay. Well, then we will see you guys next week. Thank you to all the amazing professionals that come on here and share their big brains with us. We truly appreciate it. And I know that you guys watching also appreciate it. So make sure you guys tune in every week, Thursdays at 2 p.m. And you can watch the replays on our YouTube channel, Arrow Title Services. And again, my name is Lucy McGuire with Arrow Title Services, and we will see you next week. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.